Vitebsk, Belarusian SSR, January 17, 1942. 5 Soviet soldiers found frozen solid inside a locked truck, faces locked in silent screams, fingernails torn bloody from clawing at the doors, and their logbook's final entry, "It's following us. God help us." It wears Petrov's face. From the depths of my collection, the War Maestro brings you a tale where the frozen forests of Belarus devour convoys whole, leaving only madness and ice-preserved terror in their wake. The winter of 1942 pressed down on the Eastern Front like a shroud of ice. Operation Bagration was still months away, but the Soviet forces were steadily pushing westward, reclaiming their homeland from the retreating Wehrmacht. The three-tiered Belarusian front had been tasked with liberating Vitebsk, a critical transport hub that Hitler had declared a fortress city to be defended at all costs. Colonel Dmitry Kovalev of the 158th Motor Rifle Division stood at the edge of the Klyastitsy forest, squinting through his binoculars at the tree line dusted with snow and morning fog. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air as he lowered the glasses and turned to his adjutant, Lieutenant Grishin. The thermometer on his wrist showed -30 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to freeze a man's lungs if he breathed too deeply. Convoy 716 was due at headquarters 12 hours ago, Kovalev said grimly, checking his pocket watch. 5 trucks, 18 men, and critical medical supplies, all vanished. And we have a breakthrough scheduled in less than 48 hours. Grishin shifted uncomfortably, his felt-lined boots crunching in the snow. The last radio transmission placed them 5 kilometers east of here, sir. They reported taking the forest route to avoid German artillery spotters on the main road. Kovalev nodded slowly. The decision made sense tactically, even if it violated protocol. The forest road was treacherous, but provided cover from both aircraft and artillery. With wounded men dying in field hospitals, the medical supplies couldn't wait for the approved route to be secured. "Assemble a search party," Kovalev ordered. "I want our best scout, a radio operator, a mechanic, and someone who knows these woods. We need that convoy found before the Germans realize we have a gap in our supply line." What Kovalev didn't mention was the report that had crossed his desk that morning, marked with the red stamp of the NKVD. A lone truck had been found at the forest's edge by a forward patrol. Inside were 5 men, frozen solid, still strapped in their seats. The report described their faces as fixed in expressions of extreme terror. Their eyes burst open, as if witnessing something beyond human comprehension. The engine had been warm, the doors locked from the inside, and strangest of all, there were no footprints surrounding the vehicle in the fresh snow. The official explanation cited extreme cold and engine failure, but Kovalev had fought through 3 Russian winters on the Eastern Front. He had seen men freeze to death. They didn't die with their eyes bulging and mouths locked in silent screams. They didn't lock themselves inside their vehicles, and their bodies didn't freeze solid while their engines were still warm. As Lieutenant Mikhail Barinov reported for duty as the appointed leader of the search party, Kovalev handed him the classified report, watching the younger officer's face carefully. "Find that convoy, Lieutenant," Kovalev said quietly, "and be back before nightfall. Something is wrong in those woods." Lieutenant Mikhail Barinov studied the NKVD report, his eyes lingering on the photographs of the frozen soldiers. In 15 years of military service, he had never seen death masks like these. Their skin was blue-white, frosted with ice crystals that had formed in their tear ducts and nostrils, yet their expressions suggested they had died in moments of pure, undiluted terror. Not the resigned fear of men who slowly froze, but the wild panic of men who had seen something impossible. "The search party is assembled, sir," announced Private Yuri Vetrov, a young radio operator from a nearby village. His thin face was partially hidden beneath a standard-issue ushanka, but his eyes betrayed a native's wariness about the forest that lay before them. Baranov tucked the report inside his coat. Your local, Vetrov? Yes, sir. Grew up 17 kilometers northeast, Vetrov replied, adjusting the radio pack on his shoulders. The equipment was bulky but essential. Their only link to headquarters once they entered the dense forest where the trees blocked signals across unpredictable stretches. What do your people say about these woods? Baranov asked quietly, out of earshot from the others. Vetrov hesitated, glancing toward the silent wall of pines ahead. My grandmother called it the place of the Leshy, sir. Forest spirits that punish trespassers. Old folk tales to keep children from wandering too far. And do you believe these tales, Private? I believe the Germans and their mines are danger enough, sir, Vetrov answered carefully. But my grandmother, she said the Leshy takes the form of men. It lures travelers off their paths, makes them walk in circles until they freeze or starve. Baranov nodded without comment. Superstition was rampant among soldiers. Strange beliefs often surfaced in men who lived on the knife edge of death. He himself carried a letter from his wife in his breast pocket, convinced it had stopped shrapnel during the battle for Smolensk. Rational or not, such beliefs helped men function in the face of horror. The search party consisted of 5 men: Baranov, Vetrov, a mechanic named Sokolov, a scout called Orlov who moved like a ghost, and a medic, Kuznetsov, who had insisted on coming when he learned the missing convoy carried medical supplies. They carried enough provisions for 12 hours, standard-issue weapons, and a flare gun. We follow the forest road, Baranov instructed, pointing to their map. Convoy 716 was last reported here, 5 kilometers east. We move fast. We find survivors or evidence, and we return before dark. What he didn't mention was Colonel Kovalev's final instruction, unofficial, spoken in private. If you find something unnatural, you burn it. You tell no one. The men have enough nightmares without adding new ones. As they entered the forest, the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The trees, massive ancient pines, stood like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow that occasionally fell in soft, muffled clumps. Their footsteps were the only sound, each crunch of snow unnaturally loud in the preternatural silence. No birds, Orlov observed, his rifle at the ready. Forests this size should have ravens at least. The absence of wildlife was the first warning. The second came 20 minutes later when Vetrov's radio crackled to life with a burst of static, followed by a voice, faint but unmistakable. Convoy 716 to headquarters. We are. Position unknown. Something. Following us. That's impossible, Baranov said, staring at Vetrov's radio. Check your frequencies. That transmission can't be live. Vetrov's gloved fingers worked the dials, his breath coming in short, visible puffs. Channel is correct, sir. Signal is weak, but... Wait. He pressed the headphones tighter against his ears. It's gone. Just static now. Convoy 716 disappeared 5 days ago, Sokolov muttered, shifting his weight nervously from one foot to another. Their last transmission was logged at 600 hours on January 12th. Baranov took the headphones from Vetrov, listening to the empty static that now filled the channel. Military protocol demanded they report the anomalous transmission, but something held him back. Colonel Kovalev would order them to return immediately, and the 18 missing men would remain missing. We continue, he decided, returning the headphones to Vetrov. Log the transmission, but we maintain our search pattern. The forest road narrowed as they advanced, the tire tracks from heavy military vehicles still visible despite recent snowfall. According to the map, they were approaching a fork where the main road split, one path continuing toward the front, the other veering northeast into denser forest. Tracks show the convoy took the northeast route, Orlov reported, kneeling to examine the imprints. Against protocol, this path isn't on any of our approved supply routes. It's an old logging road, Vetrov said quietly. Locals call it the Devil's Bend. Kuznetsov scoffed. Another superstition? No, it's because the road winds back on itself 7 times, like a snake. Vetrov traced the pattern in the air. In the summer, it's practically impassable. The forest grows so thick around it you can barely see 10 meters ahead. The 5 men exchanged glances. Taking an unauthorized route was a serious breach of protocol, possibly even sabotage. But with artillery fire threatening the main road, a desperate convoy commander might have risked it. They followed the northeast path, the trees growing closer together until the sky was barely visible through the dense canopy. Snow fell in intermittent showers as they walked, covering their tracks almost as quickly as they made them. After an hour, they found the first vehicle. A standard ZIS-5 truck sat abandoned in the middle of the road, its hood open, engine cold. There was no sign of damage, no bullet holes, no blood. The cargo, crates of morphine and sulfa drugs, remained untouched in the back. The driver's door hung open, the seat empty. No footprints, Orlov observed, circling the vehicle. Not one. How does a driver leave his truck without leaving tracks? Baranov examined the cabin. The ignition key was still inserted. The fuel gauge showed half full. A logbook lay open on the passenger seat. The last entry penned in hurried, slanting script. 920 hours. Jan 12. Engine trouble. Volkov went ahead to convoy lead for help. Strange lights moving between trees. They saw something in the forest, Baranov said, showing the others the logbook. Partisans? Germans? Kuznetsov suggested. Perhaps, Baranov replied, but he wasn't convinced. Partisan fighters would have taken the supplies. Germans would have burned the truck. Whatever had happened here didn't follow the rules of warfare as he understood them. As they searched the area, the radio on Vetrov's back suddenly crackled to life again. This time the voice came through with chilling clarity. This is Sergeant Volkov of Convoy 716. Yuri? Yuri Vetrov? I know you're out there. I can see you through the trees. Come help me, Yuri. I'm so cold. Vetrov's face went white. Sir, he whispered. Sergeant Volkov was my cousin. He died at Kursk last summer. Radio malfunction, Baranov stated firmly, though the certainty in his voice didn't reach his eyes. Crossed frequencies. It happens in these conditions. Vetrov's hands trembled as he switched off the radio. That was his voice, sir. Exactly his voice. The cold is playing tricks on us, Kuznetsov interjected, his medical training pushing him toward rational explanations. Auditory hallucinations aren't uncommon in extreme temperatures, the brain's way of making sense of random sounds. Baranov nodded gratefully. The doctor is right. We focus on facts, not phantoms. He consulted his map and compass. The convoy took this route. 3 more vehicles should be ahead. We continue forward, but we stay together. No one wanders off alone, understood? The men murmured their assent, but their earlier professional confidence had cracked. Each now moved with the cautious steps of men crossing thin ice, eyes darting between trees, hands never far from their weapons. Half a kilometer further, they found the second truck. Like the first, it showed no signs of damage. Unlike the first, its engine was still warm to the touch. Impossible, Sokolov whispered, his hand hovering over the radiator. This engine was running recently, within the hour. Baranov touched the metal himself, confirming Sokolov's assessment. The warmth seemed obscene against the frigid air, like a body refusing to cool after death. Inside the cabin, they found another logbook. The last entry, dated January 12th, read, 1,030 hours. Truck 3 disappeared from view ahead. Radio contact lost. Driver Petrov went to investigate, returned acting strange. claims he found a shortcut. Not on any map. Savin and I will check. Sir, Orlov called from the back of the truck. You need to see this. In the cargo area were crates of ammunition, but someone had arranged them in a peculiar pattern, forming a rough circle with strange markings scratched into the wooden lids. At the center of the circle lay a map of the area, different from their military-issued ones. It was older, hand-drawn, with locations marked in faded Cyrillic script predating the Soviet era. A thick line of charcoal marked a path through the forest that didn't appear on their official maps, ending at a location marked simply as Staria Tsurkov, the old church. Folk magic, Kuznetsov scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. Desperate men resort to superstition. There's no church in these woods, Vetrov said, studying the map with a frown. Not that I've ever heard of. The church isn't important, Barinov said, taking the map. What matters is this path. If the convoy followed it, that's where we'll find them. As they prepared to continue, Orlov suddenly raised his hand for silence. Listen, he whispered. Through the stillness came the distant sound of an engine, faint but unmistakable, the labored rumble of a Z5 truck struggling through snow. Survivors, Kuznetsov breathed, hope lighting his face. Barinov wasn't so certain. Spread out. Defensive positions. If it's our people, they'll identify themselves. They took cover behind trees, weapons ready. As the sound grew louder, through the swirling snow, a pair of headlights appeared, moving slowly along the forest road. A Soviet truck emerged from the white haze, its windshield frosted over, making it impossible to see the driver. Identify yourselves, Barinov called out, his voice echoing through the trees. The truck stopped. Its engine continued to idle, sending plumes of exhaust into the cold air. The driver's door remained closed. This is Lieutenant Barinov of the 158th Motor Rifle Division. Identify yourselves immediately. Slowly, the driver's window rolled down. From the darkened interior, a pale face emerged. A Soviet soldier with lieutenant's insignia, his features identical to Baranov's own. I am Lieutenant Baranov, the figure said in Baranov's voice, and I've come to guide you home. Orlov fired first, a single shot that shattered the truck's windshield. The figure behind the wheel didn't flinch, didn't bleed, only smiled wider with Baranov's face, the expression stretching unnaturally at the corners. Hold your fire! Barinov shouted, his own face drained of color as he stared at his doppelganger. A cold sweat broke across his forehead despite the freezing temperature. The truck's engine revved once, then died with a sputtering cough. In the sudden silence, the figure behind the wheel dissolved like mist, leaving the cabin empty. Did you see that? Sokolov gasped, his rifle barrel trembling. Tell me you all saw that. No one answered. No one needed to. They had all witnessed the impossible, a phantom with Baranov's face, a truck that appeared and disappeared like a mirage. It's the cold, Kuznetsov insisted, but his medical certainty had abandoned him. Shared hallucination happens to troops in extreme conditions. Vetrov shook his head. My grandmother warned about this. The Leshy takes familiar forms to lure travelers deeper into the forest. It's how it hunts. Enough, Barinov snapped, the sharp edge of fear in his voice. We are Soviet soldiers, not superstitious children. We complete our mission. But doubt had taken root. Each man now questioned what his eyes reported, what his ears heard. Reality itself seemed thin in these woods, like ice ready to crack underfoot. They found the third truck, 2 kilometers ahead, its rear doors flung open, medical supplies scattered across the snow. Blood trailed from the back of the vehicle, droplets frozen into tiny crimson beads that led into the trees before suddenly stopping. Inside the cabin, the radio was still on, hissing static broken by occasional fragments of speech too garbled to understand. The dashboard clock had stopped at 11:43. A flask of vodka lay on the floor, its contents frozen solid despite the alcohol content that should have prevented it. Baranov checked his watch. 14:30. They had been searching for hours, and daylight would fail within 3 more. The thought of being in these woods after dark sent a primal shiver through him. "Sir," Vetrov called, his voice tight with restraint. "The radio." Baranov listened. Through the static came a woman's voice, speaking softly in Belarusian. "Yuri, my sweet boy, why did you leave your mother alone? Come home to me. Follow the old path. I've made your favorite soup." Vetrov's face contorted. "That's my mother's voice," he whispered. "But she died when I was 12, typhus." As the voice continued to call, something changed in Vetrov's eyes, a glazing over, a loss of focus. Without warning, he dropped his pack and bolted into the trees, following the blood trail. "Vetrov, stop!" Baranov shouted, but the private was already swallowed by the swirling snow and dense pines. The 3 remaining men plunged after him, following his footprints, calling his name. The tracks led deeper into the forest, away from the road, toward a part of the woods where the trees grew so close together, they formed a nearly impenetrable wall. Then, abruptly, Vetrov's footprints ended in an unbroken field of snow. "Impossible," Orlov muttered, circling the area. "No one vanishes without a trace." A branch snapped somewhere in the distance. All 3 men raised their weapons. Through the trees ahead, they glimpsed a massive silhouette, a truck much larger than the Soviet ZIS-5s, its outlines blurred by falling snow. As they watched, a figure moved in front of the headlights, the unmistakable shape of Vetrov, his arms hanging limply at his sides, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Private Vetrov," Baranov called. "Report back immediately." Vetrov didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked stiffly toward the waiting truck. Before any of them could react, he climbed inside and the vehicle lumbered away, its engine making a sound unlike any Soviet machine, a deep, rhythmic throbbing that reminded Baranov of a massive heart. "We have to follow them," Baranov ordered, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Sokolov, Kuznetsov, return to base. Report what we've found. Orlov and I will track Vetrov." Neither man moved. "That's a direct order," Baranov snapped. "With respect, sir," Sokolov said quietly. "We split up, we die. Whatever's happening, we face it together." Kuznetsov nodded in agreement. "The convoy split up. Look what happened to them." Baranov wanted to argue, to enforce military discipline, but they were right. Division meant death in these woods. "Fine, we move as one. But at the first sign of Vetrov or survivors, we extract immediately." They followed the truck's tracks, which should have been impossible to miss in the fresh snow, yet they kept disappearing, reappearing 50 meters ahead, as if the vehicle phased in and out of existence. The temperature continued to drop as afternoon faded toward evening. -40 degrees Fahrenheit, according to Baranov's thermometer. Cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. Each breath became painful, the air burning their lungs like liquid fire. "I've never felt cold like this," Kuznetsov murmured, his medical training once again pushing him towards scientific explanation. "This is beyond normal winter temperatures for this region." "Because it's not natural cold," Sokolov whispered. "It's hungry cold." The strange tracks led them to a clearing where the forest abruptly opened up. In the center stood the ruins of what might once have been a church, a structure so ancient that trees grew through its collapsed roof, stone walls crumbling back into the earth. The old church, from the map, and parked in a perfect semicircle before it were the missing trucks of Convoy 716. "We found them," Orlov breathed, relief and dread mingling in his voice. But Baranov felt no relief. The vehicles were covered in a thick layer of ice that glinted in the fading daylight, as if they had been frozen in place for years, not days. No footprints disturbed the snow around them. No smoke rose from their exhausts. "Approach with caution," he ordered. "Check for survivors." They moved forward slowly, weapons ready. As they drew closer, Baranov saw dark shapes inside the truck cabins, human silhouettes, unmoving behind frosted glass. The first truck contained 3 soldiers, frozen solid in their seats. Their expressions mirrored those in the NKVD photographs, eyes wide with horror, mouths stretched in silent screams. Ice crystals formed perfect patterns across their skin, branching like tiny ferns. "They're all dead," Kuznetsov confirmed after checking each vehicle. "Frozen, but something's wrong. The ice formation on the bodies, it's from the inside out, as if they froze from within." The last truck in the line was different. Its engine was running, sending plumes of exhaust into the twilight air. The driver's seat was empty, but someone sat in the passenger side, Private Vetrov, staring straight ahead, unblinking. "Vetrov," Barinov called, approaching cautiously. "Can you hear me?" Vetrov turned slowly, mechanically. His eyes were glazed with a milky film, his skin bluish-white. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "They're coming now. The eternal convoy. The devil's caravan. They heard you calling." From the forest behind them came the sound of engines, multiple vehicles approaching through the trees. But these weren't the labored rumbles of Soviet trucks. These were deeper, older sounds, like mechanical beasts drawing breath. "Who's coming, Vetrov?" Barinov demanded, grabbing the private's shoulders. "What happened to Convoy 716? Vetrov's lips curved in a smile that never reached his eyes. "They joined the convoy, as we all must. The Chertov Vozok demands new drivers. The forest is hungry in winter." The sounds grew louder, engines growling, metal groaning. Through the trees, headlights appeared, weaving between ancient trunks with impossible precision. "Run," Orlov whispered, backing away. "Sir, we need to run, now." Baranov tried to pull Vetrov from the truck, but the private's body was already stiff, ice forming beneath his skin like a crystal lattice. As Baranov watched in horror, Vetrov's eyes clouded over completely, turning to milky white orbs. His final words came as barely a whisper. "Too late. He's already wearing your face." The forest erupted with mechanical roars as ancient trucks materialized between the trees, vehicles from wars long past. A German Opel Blitz from the current conflict, a Russo Bolt from the Great War, horse-drawn supply wagons with wooden wheels and rotting canvas covers, all of them encrusted with ice, all driven by figures whose faces remained hidden in shadow. "Fall back," Barinov ordered, firing his rifle at the lead vehicle. The bullets pinged harmlessly off metal that should have been penetrated easily. "To the church." The 3 men retreated toward the ruined structure, firing as they went. Their bullets made no difference. The phantom vehicles continued their inexorable advance, forming a circle around the clearing. Inside the crumbling church walls, Sokolov frantically worked their radio. "Mayday, Mayday. Search party requesting immediate extraction. We are under attack." Only static answered him. Kuznetsov checked their flare gun. "1 flare left. Do we fire it?" "Save it," Baranov ordered. "No one will see it through these trees. We need to break through their line, make it back to the road." But the circle of vehicles had completely surrounded the church ruins. And now, figures were emerging from each truck. Soldiers in uniforms spanning centuries of warfare, Soviet infantry from their own unit, Wehrmacht troops in winter gear, Imperial Russian Army soldiers from the Tsar's time, all moving with the same stiff gait, all with the same milky eyes. "The Chertov Vozhak," Orlov whispered. "The devil driver. He collects soldiers who die lost in the forest. Among the approaching figures, Baranov recognized the missing men from Convoy 716. Their faces were pale blue, their movements jerky, like puppets on strings. Behind them all stood a taller figure, a man in a black Soviet officer's coat that reached to the ground. His face remained in shadow beneath his ushanka, but somehow Baranov knew what they would see if that face were revealed, his own features, smiling with inhuman malice. "We can't fight them all," Sokolov said, counting their remaining ammunition. "There are dozens." Baranov made his decision. The flare. Fire it at the trucks, the fuel tanks. Kuznetsov raised the flare gun, aiming at the nearest vehicle. His hand shook, but he steadied himself, squeezing the trigger. The flare arced through the twilight air, a brilliant red star against the darkening sky. It struck the fuel tank of a Zis-5, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the truck exploded in a fireball that illuminated the entire clearing. The blast knocked them off their feet, the heat momentarily driving back the supernatural cold. In the chaos that followed, Baranov saw their chance. Now, run for the road. They sprinted through the gap created by the explosion, past burning wreckage and shambling figures that seemed momentarily disoriented by the flames. The forest swallowed them once more, branches whipping their faces, as they ran blindly through deepening darkness. Behind them, engines roared to life again. The pursuit had begun. "Don't look back," Baranov shouted. "Keep moving." But Sokolov did look back. He stumbled, crying out in terror at what he saw. Before Baranov could reach him, the mechanic was gone, dragged into the darkness by unseen hands. Kuznetsov fell next, his legs tangling in roots that seemed to writhe with purpose across the forest floor. His scream cut off abruptly, leaving only Baranov, running alone through the endless trees. The lieutenant ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out. He collapsed in the snow, certain that death was moments behind him. But when he finally found the courage to look up, he saw the tree line ahead, and beyond it, the lights of Soviet encampment. Somehow, impossibly, he had found his way out. 3 days later, Lieutenant Mikhail Baranov sat in a NKVD interrogation room, recounting his story for the 5th time. Each telling was different. Details changed, timelines shifted, names were forgotten and remembered. The only consistency was his insistence that something in the forest had hunted them, something that wore the faces of the living. "And your men?" the NKVD officer asked. "What happened to them?" "Taken," Baranov whispered, "added to the convoy." "The convoy that drives endlessly through the forest? The one no one has ever seen?" The officer's skepticism was palpable. "The one you'll join someday," Baranov replied, his eyes suddenly clear and cold. "When the Chertov Vozha calls your name." They committed him to a psychiatric hospital in Moscow a week later, diagnosed with extreme combat fatigue and delusional paranoia. He never spoke again. Operation Bagration commenced in June 1942. Soviet forces liberated Vitebsk, pushing the Germans westward. The area where Convoy 716 disappeared was designated a military exclusion zone without explanation. To this day, locals avoid the Klyastitsy forest after dark. They say that on the coldest winter nights, you can hear the distant rumble of engines moving among the trees, an eternal convoy searching for new drivers to join their ranks. And sometimes, in the deep snow, they find tracks that start and stop without explanation, as if vehicles appear from nowhere and vanish just as suddenly, leaving nothing behind but the lingering echo of a horn that sounds almost like a human cry. If this tale from the War Maestro's Archive sent chills through your veins, consider joining our ranks of military horror enthusiasts. Check your radio for static voices before subscribing. You'll want to be notified when our next classified file is declassified. Hit that notification bell. In these woods of content, you don't want to get lost alone. Share this story with fellow explorers of the dark corners of military history. The Phantom Convoy always has room for more passengers. Remember, some convoys are still driving endlessly through the night, searching for new recruits to join their ranks.